Hello everyone, this is Mike Levin on Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. I was once accused of writing my magnum opus, and I had to Google what that was, and it seems it's my great work, and the subject matter of that writing was, well, let's just say not what I'd like to be remembered for. But my course corrections have begun, and I've decided to do something symbolically now at 50 to get momentum moving in the right direction. Now I'm 51, and I made a New Year's resolution, and now it's February. So in the spirit of having my first year to think about it, and then the first month of my second year to write about it, I now have something. February 1st is an appropriate day to roll it out, but I must not delay, if not tonight, then when, and so my magnum opus, at least the first roughing out. I'll probably spend the next 20 years refining, revising, and republishing it in different ways. I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, but it's time to try something interesting here, and I figured I'd be publishing this on pythonically.com or pythonically.org. Hello world, it's Mike Levin, but that's just a label. Welcome to my latest attempt to solve life, love, and tech. Firstly for myself, secondly for you. At 50 years old, I realized my ikigai was teaching you Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. And I've used visuals from lifted all over the net. I'm going to say fair use for this because I'm doing an editorial piece, an essay, a commentary. So I'll be often pulling up graphics that I found off of the internet, and I'll be trying to credit original sources as I go. But the ikigai is an important concept. It's the intersection. It's a Venn diagram of what we're good at, what we love, what the world needs, and what we can get paid for. And there's some intersections that are nice where we can feed our passion, our mission, our vocation, or our profession. But in the middle, when everything overlaps, it's a way of finding reason for being. It's a formula for purpose, I suppose. So that's always made an impression on me. So these tools serve you 80% of the time using only the first 20% of your effort. The 80-20 rule, aka the Pareto curve or Ziff curve. There's a variety of ways of looking at it. And the 80-20 rule needs to be employed because life is short and you gotta act before you're out of time. The 80-20 friggin' rule, gotta use it. It's a tool reducing clutter that we pack into our lives that hold us back. As portrayed by a general tangle, in this case a fishing line, people gravitate towards using the most convenient thing to grab onto. Vendors put traps in the path of uninformed learners. Free tools from vendors exist only to make money off of you later. If you don't know any other paths, then it's like this. And that is, of course, a cattle chute. Disruptive new products are crushed. Vendors especially control your every bias through the use of development environments. Control development of everyone's habits and muscle memory, and you control development. Wax on, wax off. So I'm not saying to snub the power tools, but I am saying to have contingency plans. And what better contingency plan than the free and open plumbing of tech? Unix/Linux 1. Windows is the only major platform left that's not Nix underneath yet. The fundamentals exist lower than desktop software or mobile apps. Dependence on vendor tools keeps you from learning the underlying fundamentals. The joke goes that when our machine children return to see what we made of Earth in 10,000 years, they'll still have Linux underneath. The actual joke goes they'll have a Linux boot kernel, but I figured I'd make it for a more mainstream audience because we haven't talked about boot kernels and stuff. So if you learn Nix, you don't depend on any commercial products and resist obsolescence. Unix, live free or die. The internet, web, Unix, Linux, and related tools were all not supposed to happen. Here's a quote by Steve Ballmer. Linux is a cancer that attaches itself in an intellectual property sense to everything it touches. Microsoft can't stop the advance of the web, Linux, Python, and Git, but they can grab you by your tools. Name something even Bill Gates can't buy. Linux, because it's already free. The number one trick used to kill threats while they're still being born is called embrace and displace. Each one of these graphics I use really has a long story deserving of a conversation of its own, but Sun Microsystems sued Microsoft to stop doing J++, basically corrupting the Java standard that was published by Sun. When embrace and displace is somehow impossible, the number two trick is confounding with complexity. And I've just illustrated a few things that over the years have added more complexity to otherwise simple processes. I put JavaScript in there, really? Well, modern JavaScript frameworks being basically unusable without power tools is fortunate for Microsoft. There's your hamster wheel with your goal, and then your new goal so that you keep running on the hamster wheel. That's the JavaScript framework du jour for Node.js, such as going from React to Vue to Svelte to the next thing. And the combination of VS Code, JavaScript, and cloud services puts you at the mercy of big tech. And again, I'll be crediting these original artists as many times as I can. I'm going to be calling fair use on this first pass here. It is editorial in nature, and I do have the best intents to put all the credits. Once on vendorware, a cascade of plugin dependencies seal your fate. Big tech doesn't want you forming habits around free and open source software. Trend churn threatens your superpowers about every 5 years. If your powers come from easily cut off sources, proprietary software that has changed versions, that you didn't pay for the upgrade, etc., that you don't have enough licensing, whatever, if your powers are tied to easily cut off sources, you're dead. The next crop of fads will race to replace you. And that is DHH, the creator of Ruby on Rails, a very popular trend on the web for a while until Node.js stuff replaced it. And the creator of Node.js is already even trying to obsolete it with, I think, something called Dino. And it's basically Node.js rewritten in Rust. So where can you even hang your hat anymore? So you're not always getting obsoleted. Well, quality, timeless, free and open source software like Linux, Python, Vim, and Git let you improve endlessly, see, because they don't change on you so much. My slow start dragged out over the invention of this stuff, but my story can help you start out fast. I was born 1970, the same year as Unix, and grew up 99.9 miles away. I went to the first college to require everyone to buy computers, happened to be Macs. However, by this time, I had already fallen in love with the Amiga computer from Commodore. That's the A1000 pictured there. The Amiga was made by a guy who knew how to make cheap hardware fly. We'll see a picture of him later. I'm talking about J. Miner. Sadly, the Amiga and Commodore's founder were fated to be at different companies. See, Commodore acquired the Amiga, but the person who kicked off the whole process, who founded Commodore, ended up being at a different company by that time. The Amiga was a liberating tool for creativity like nothing before. That's what's that guy's name? Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was a big advocate of the Amiga, or fan of it. My professional skills and very self-image became tied to this quirky piece of hardware. But then the Amiga went away, along with my first 10 years / 10,000 hours of mastery. And that is Malcolm Gladwell, author of Outliers, who helped popularize the research making that point. With the passion of a 20-something, I took it as a betrayal by a tool that I loved. You think that the tools you're using today will be there in 10 years, or if not, it's no big deal. But for people who are in it for the love of mastering tools, it's an issue. Grappling hook. If you know, you know. Believing Microsoft a sure bet, I learned even more subtle forms of platform betrayal. And here is ASP.NET. That .NET part on ASP made all the difference. It turned out to be an insurmountable surprise, and I just couldn't get over it. ASP.NET was an early React Redux. I hated it then and I hate it now. And this shows how things start out simple, and then all this different stuff from object-oriented to design patterns and abstracted interfaces kick in to make things super complex in terms of code. And as you have more programming experience along that x-axis, you see your code gets simpler over the years. You're not ignoring those things that make it complex. You're just choosing the right bits so that your code can stay small. I would rather not do web dev while I wait for generic timeless tech to mature than to poison my soul. So, this is one of the promising ones that makes web development look approachable again to me. There's a few other things that get sprinkled in, like Alpine.js would be one, but talk about that in later videos. Maybe I'm just sensitive. Yes, I am sensitive. If you don't see that, you miss the point. I am currently mostly coding because I found love-worthy tools. All elements in matter have unique vibrations, as does all energy, objects, and even you. You see where I'm going? So maybe I'm sensitive, then I get to the foo-foo stuff. Yeah, vibrations are real. We all have vibes. E = mc squared. We are standing waveforms. We're condensed light. Luckily, we are not stuck with our DNA birth vibe. So at the moment of conception, when those 23 chromosomes exchange and the die is cast of what you are, your starting vibe, we are continuously harmonizing with it, the music of life. We're not stuck with that birth DNA vibe. We're harmonizing with it. Happiness is often a function of whether your actions are in sync with your vibe, harmonizing with it, Everyone's vibe aligns either to the walrus or the carpenter. Walruses love rewards, but not the work it takes to get there. Walruses are posers who can only manipulate carpenters to do their bidding. It's fine to be a carpenter and have the love of craft, indeed, of life itself, if you ask me. Business and society runs on manipulating carpenters. Indoctrination into plausible nonsense is the walrus's main cabbages and kings. Look, an elephant. This is a message about misdirection. Other videos will cover this nonsense in more depth. Aspiring carpenters adopt all kinds of ridiculous tools in the face of such nonsense. So the trick when taking up carpentry is careful selection of timeless soul-feeding tools. Here we have an image of the reduction of challenges to first principles and new ideas. And this is what should go into the selection of tools. Half my life I ran in place by using unlove-worthy tools. I needed to get better at my craft over time without constant resets. So in my mid-30s, I went on a quest to find the best tech kung fu. I found the still living, underlying beating heart of modern tech. I learned about the power of playground projects and nerdy inside jokes, coupled with the power of subversion and virulence. I learned the stories of other awesome, quirky techs that lost, just like my beloved Amiga. This is the head of the MIT lab that created all the Lisp and incompatible timeshare system and basically non-Unix type techs that didn't win the digital revolution. I accepted that what's best doesn't always win, and what does win likely has love-worthy bits. Look harder. It's a little hard to describe how I got to be a Nix user. The story starts the year I was born, a short drive away. Multics led to Unix, led to Linux. Long story short, that's a Millennium Falcon speeding away from an exploding Death Star with a little zoom into some familiar faces from an earlier slide. In nearby burbs, non-Unix/Linux home computers were all that was available. I got the Coleco Atom. I got into a Unix-like platform by the grace of a broken computer junked by my local community college. Different computer than the Atom. I might have to clarify that better. While Amiga DOS wasn't Unix, I luckily still learned many timeless Unix-like tricks. Here is the Fred Fish disk that was distributed in 1991 that had Vim on it. I became president of the local Amiga users group and went to work for Commodore. Very heady stuff. That's not me. Those were the days. I learned I love to get in the zone with tech tools, as one would with musical instruments. I made the mistake of falling in love with a particular hardware platform. It turns out the Amiga was a little something of a space anomaly. I had platform separation anxiety when Amiga computer died. And there is Jay Miner, who also had passed away somewhere along that time. Or perhaps losing a favorite tool is more like phantom limb syndrome. The Amiga did everything you asked. You easily got spoiled. multitasking, inter-process communication, cool graphics, and Unix-like OS gone. I was not optimistic about tools of the new millennium. I switched to Macs to be on Unix. Unix on Mac was okay, but for FOSS I went unsatisfyingly from Mac ports to Fink to Homebrew. There was nothing official in the way of a free and open source software repository on the Mac. This is an ivory tower, one of the ways of portraying Unix, which the Mac is based on, versus Linux, which has more readily available software repos. I powered my way lovelessly through the next 20 years, settling for not such great stuff. Unchanging yet always relevant parts revealed themselves. This is the White Lotus. If you just keep moving, you will come to a better place. The Last Airbender. It takes a while, but the wisdom of the crowd eventually asserts itself. My quest turned out to be for a fun type of timeless obsolescence inherent in much of Unix/Linux. Don't panic, but this means the old terminal shell or command line interface, aka bash. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Dealing with command line interface is a lot like that. Trying to correct the spacing issue there. Thankfully, there's one thing you can run from terminal that makes things much better. I'm, of course, talking about Python. Python made my heart sing for joy like nothing since the Amiga. Specific hardware platform love is now replaced in my heart with abstracted love. Like many, I had to get over the macho name. Fact, Python is not named after a constrictor snake. I didn't want to show a snake again since it made it to the logo, so I used Robin Williams. Throbbing Python of Love, an album he has. I bought it through iTunes. Seriously, Python is named after Monty Python, the British comedy troupe. You might think this a small point, but it's key to seeing that Python maybe isn't what you think. And now I actually show a little code in violation of, if you want to lose them, show code. Python's a light, breezy language that uses colons and indents for structure. There's a basic Python program with a loop. Once you learn lists, tuples, and dicts, you will know 80% of what you need to know in your first 20% of effort. So I show a little output saying, I go ahead, I define a list, I defined a tuple, and I defined a dict, and then I tell it to print each, and then I throw in, printing the type of each, you see. And then I throw in printing the type of a hello world and the type of the numeral 1, list, tuple, dict, string, int, right? So those are those 5 print statements of the types of those different things. And you've learned a lot about Python there. You really know a lot. Lists hold sequences of objects and can be appended to, but tuples are of fixed length and cannot. So here is your list being appended to with the numeral 4, and it shows you 1, 2, 3, 4. And now you can attempt to do that with a tuple, but it will throw an error because Tuple object has no attribute append. Okay, so learn to look at and read the Python errors, and you can do different things with different types of sequences. So a list of tuples is like a spreadsheet table you can add rows to, a lot of rows. That's that structure. That is 3 tuples inside a list. Square brackets indicate list, parentheses indicate tuples. Data structures like this are approximately data frames or spreadsheets or tables, such as in a SQL table. So it's a very, very popular data structure, easily built in Python. With this, plus a few more tricks, you can build anything from grounding exercises to googly empires. So I think that learning to code is good just merely for the mental exercise and the grounding it gives you. But of course, you can build an empire out of it too. But the rub is that you can't get away from your abilities being tied to some text editor. Here's some old popular ones. As you research editors, you'll find VI or Vim has always been there and will always be there. And I throw in a comic here. You know, if you go in there, there's no coming back. I have to do it. I have to know what happened to my friends. The fool. The VI text editor. One of the original text editors in Unix that has, well, Vim was released in 1991, and VI that it's based on in 1976. Still going strong. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight, not as clumsy or random as a blaster, an elegant weapon for a more civilized time. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Vim is like having telepathic control over text on any computer. So why doesn't everyone use Vim? It's got a steep learning curve. I recommend using the standalone version of Jupyter Lab to learn Python. Once Jupyter jumpstarts you, NBDev enables some of the first Nix tricks. NBDev opens the way to blogging from a Python code, 24/7 scheduling by exporting your notebooks to modules that you can schedule, and making shareable Python packages with those same .py files with built-in documentation. So, two-faced, guardian, holder of the keys to the kingdom, different realms. As you learn Vim, dependency on Jupyter Notebooks goes away. Right? So you're replacing the need for a crutch with a tool that will serve you for the rest of your life. Linux, Python, Vim, and Git form a minimal, timeless platform. Microsoft, who needs to own the popular dev tools, knows this too. Existential crisis. Where am I going? What am I doing? What is the meaning of life? Well, Microsoft now offers Linux, hired Python's creator, bought GitHub, and made VS Code. This legitimizes my views and shows how important the editor is. I'm good. The problem with VS Code is how it hardwires you to Microsoft's ways. It's a trap. If nature just chose the most convenient available thing, our bones would be made of glass. Our bodies chose extruding foamy metal over more abundant silicon. Nature and tech both prune the worst designs over time. Can't stop, I'm too busy. Most of the wacky life form designs from the Cambrian explosion are gone. Even Microsoft has to change who they fundamentally are in order to survive. Oh, guess Linux isn't cancer after all. That's the Debian logo, more or less, which Microsoft aligned with. Did I forget to explain Git versus GitHub? Git is a distributed version control system for code safety, branching, and collaboration. Good stuff. Linux, Python, and Vim are each ways of life. Git's just a program you've got to use. You just got to face it. Hard medicine, but fact of life. Microsoft bought GitHub.com, not Git, so your code can be free. You don't have to use GitHub, and I can recommend using it, but the attempt at subversion, commit failed. Really nerdy joke. Microsoft hired Guido van Rossum, but they don't own Python. Your code can be free. Microsoft supports Linux as a subsystem, but they didn't buy Linux. Your code can be free. And Vim's not totally subverted yet. Your code can be free. But your code will only be free if your lifetime of muscle memory can't be taken away. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dependencies never go away. All you can do is switch from vendors' pockets to shoulders of giants. Right? You can't get rid of your dependencies. You got to choose your dependencies, and some good shoulders of giants to stand on are these people for Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, who is the first one again. And they had winning implementations. They had the implementations that became popular and won. So yay for winning implementations. But really, if we're giving credit, there's a lot more credit to go around. That's Dennis Ritchie, who co-founded Unix with Ken Thompson at Bell Labs. This is one of the people who made the ABC programming language on which Python was based. This is Bill Joy, who created the VI text editor. And this is the guy who made what Git was copied of. I forget his name and everything, but BitKeeper, maybe it was. I think it might have been BitKeeper. So the unsung heroes who didn't make the winning implementation. Speaking of winning implementations, there are some amazing unknown ones all around us. That's Andrew Tannenbaum, I think his name is. For over 10 years, every Intel CPU has had a full shadow OS called Minix running behind the scenes. Yeah, you've got a second operating system on your machine. This just reinforces how powerless you are against vendors if you don't know about this stuff. You got to know this stuff. You got to know the old school way things work and what's going on in a machine. My purpose here is really to teach you the one step most people can't take. Losing your fear for the Unix-like command line interface, aka terminal or shell. There's no need to fear, the CLI is always here. The CLI is less intuitive than point and click, but lets you automate tasks more easily. When things go wrong, you just have to adjust a few scripts. Now, the web isn't going away, but the idea that JavaScript is the one language to rule them all will. JavaScript is to the web what PostScript was to laser printers. Platforms change. New disrupts old. Amidst the churn, Python persists. As you research Python, you'll find it's the new lingua franca of tech. Python plays the role of your native spoken language, but for explicit expression. It's like your English, but for tech. And why not wait for the AIs? Because it's explicit. It's a precise way to talk to machines. The web will likely become a popular subsystem, always there, like regex or SQLite. The web interface, the web API, will be built in all the time. Browsers will be little things that can pop up as subsystems of other things, but it's not necessarily the leading tech. The leading tech is what is always there on a fresh Linux install. The trick is to balance eternally applicable skills with today's reality. Sensing your fear of falling, shepherds move in to flock you. Avoid tying your 10 years, 10,000 hours of passionate mastery to perishable tech with a short shelf life. Even when machine intelligence occurs, speaking Python will have value. I emphasize machine intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, so future overlords do not take offense. New machine intelligences will likely be highly sensitive. So are you a sensitive person, going through all the things of a sensitive person? You bet those AIs, those first sentient ones, are going to be very sensitive. We're going to have to be good parents to these things. We live in the vibrating edge where stable orbits permit sentient life. Life is a balance between order and chaos. Chaos isn't necessarily bad, nor is order all good. The idea is that life is worth it for the finding of love-worthy things in that balance between order and chaos, things like Mogwais. Even love-worthy things have scary, painful downsides that you'll feel good about overcoming. There are dark places. I almost put the gremlin in here with a mohawk, but I was like, calls for Dr. Seuss. He evokes these feelings better, the downsides and dark aspects of all the love-worthy things in life, because feed them after midnight, add water, all this stuff goes wrong. It's not like it's, everything works well perfectly. And remember, you're wired up in layers. You get triggered by your fast electric nervous system. Triggers release chemical messages into your blood for follow-up work. Serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine do most of the work to keep your orbit emotionally stable. Here's the three main culprits and their overlap in the middle. I know it's not exactly like this, but the trick is balance. Balance between your fight or flight chemical, your hearth and home chemical, and their hey, I'm snowboarding chemical. Fight or flight response to non-life-threatening situation, to non-life-threatening stimuli is anxiety. So if you feel like this guy and there's no bear chasing you, that's anxiety. It's the fight or flight response to inappropriate stimuli. For example, learning new tricks triggers anxiety. So you must also learn emotional resiliency. Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of this hat. Again, recognize old patterns and intercept the old triggers. So, of course, Charlie Brown should have stopped falling for that trick, but also be able to just take that fall. It's always a brave new world, so always be a brave new you. It's time for a new adventure. Come on. And that's about as far as I feel like sharing today. It's already up to a nearly 40-minute video, but I'll scroll way up to the top. This is my reminder to myself of many things to keep myself on track. There's some concepts like the rabbit hole, chasing the rabbit down the rabbit hole, and how to avoid situations from which you'll never come back. And there's like a middle and end to this story as well, but I felt because of all my commitment stuff and wanting to get this out there and to get momentum going in the right direction, I would go ahead and share it. So that's about it. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. And don't forget to subscribe.